Welcome to another episode of NatChat, the Natilik podcast. We are excited to feature a NatChat takeover by the Natilik multi-cloud technical team, hosted by Nicholas Diesel, multi-cloud solution architect. Take it away, Nick.
Today we're going to be recapping some of the PureAccelerate event that took place in Woolwich, Works in London on the 10th of October 2023. And today I'm joined by Natilik's technical experts, Matthias Prokop, multi-cloud technology director, Nigel Pine, our multi-cloud principal architect, and Adam Bonney, our chief technology officer. So welcome, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, Nick.
Hello.
So Pure's annual London conference, we always expect to see lots of new and exciting updates. And what would be interesting is to just take a quick go around the room and just see what were our major takeaways from this year. Adam, if we come to you first.
Yeah, sure. I probably got most excited about the least exciting announcement, actually, which is that's about right. So I think I'm probably most excited about it's not really even a Pure specific thing, but I guess just sort of the market move towards more affordable QLC with higher densities, which Pure have then used to create, higher density direct flash modules. So not particularly staggeringly wow, just more flash, great. But it's kind of particularly interesting to me, I suppose, because one of the teams I look after manage our kind of global hosting platform, which is underpinned by a fleet of flash arrays. But we look after a lot of data that we can't currently put on flash array just because it's just not suitable. It's like bulk storage, audio, compressed images, etc. So we've had to always maintain a second set of arrays with, nasty NLSAS spinning disks from a second vendor, specifically for that use case. But it was pretty clear at Accelerate that, Pure are out there to remove those now. They want to take the last sort of bastion of spinning disks away. And with this, dropping QLC price, it looks like they can now kind of achieve that with the Flash Array E. So, as I say, not super exciting, but I'm excited to be able to finally displace those kind of last bastions of spinning disks that we have and consolidate on a single vendor and get all of the benefits from Flash's technology or Pure's technology.
I find it quite amazing when they walked up on stage and they were showing the direct flash modules and the sort of the density inside those modules, where they used to be a terabyte or less, and now they're up to 75 terabytes and 150 on the way. It just seems absolutely crazy how much is getting crammed in such a small module these days. You're going to start seeing, single petabyte units and things like that coming out soon. So yeah, it definitely opens up the realm to a lot more in terms of archiving storage and just general storage for large format files.
But it is something that isn't just, obviously the technology itself and it's exciting. I'm sorry, we're technologists, right? Something like that is exciting. But the relevance, and I kind of get the feeling Pure and the decisions that they've made and what they've been founded on and they've been recognized on is actually more relevant now than it's ever been with what's going on macro on the planet. Sustainability is a big thing. And that plays right into that for any company, right? Because if they're able then to adopt this technology in the format that Pure are able to deliver it in, uniquely so, then they're able to achieve their sustainability targets as well. So I think that's exciting. It's not just on a single front. It's not technology and it's just technology. It's actually having a wider impact, or can potentially have a bigger impact globally that benefits everyone.
Yeah, and I think on the sustainability piece, I'm still expecting to see more. It just feels like we're only scratching the surface. Where are we now? I think, when you see the modules and what you were mentioning, Nigel, about the efficiency to basically trying to compress as much data as we can on the single modules, I'm hoping to see way more. There's just so many different parts and pieces in the data center. How to make them working efficiently together. It almost feels now we're trying to solve the challenge around sustainability and storage, which essentially is probably I think, and I was even seeing the numbers, I think it's 30% of the consumption, the data center consumption, power consumption. Data centers globally, I think it's 1 or 2% power consumption, so it's significant. but it's just the 30%, right? There's like other
Yeah,
60, 50, 60% in the data center. So how these like different parts can work together. I'm quite curious, like maybe if there will be some sort of like opening up, there's so much stuff we can do around the APIs and integrate these moving parts and make them more efficient and more sustainable.
Yeah, didn't they say when they were bounding about some numbers, somewhere specifically around Ireland, which is obviously very dense in terms of data centers. I think I quickly ran off the numbers, and it's like 6% of Ireland's total electricity use is purely the storage in the data centers that it hosts. So, like, if you're doubling the density of your flash arrays every few years, then taking 3% off of Ireland's total power usage is not insignificant, is it?
Yeah, yeah, and the cooling, right? Like, I think cooling in the data center is sort of we're seeing a little bit of the renaissance with the water cooling and all this stuff. So I'm sort of like expecting and looking forward to if Pure Storage and other storage vendors will be starting exploring more, different type of cooling, more efficient ones.
Well, that's a really good point, actually, isn't it? Because I was reading an article the other day that was talking about data center efficiency and the fact that it's essentially plateaued. There was like a long period of time where the PUE, which is the measure of efficiency, increased like quite significantly. Like every year it was going, like doubling, etc. But I can't remember what the time frame is now. I think it's like at least a year where it's been pretty stagnant. Like it's seen really minimal increase. You've got like the ababatic designs and things, and now they've kind of optimized them. The PUE really isn't kind of like dropping anymore. So more than ever, like increasing the efficiency of your hardware is really important, because that's the only way we're going to drive better power efficiency in data centers now, because we've sort of maxed out the cooling, short of, like you say, like plumbing in some water cooling or something really cool, which I'd love because I've got a water cooled PC here, right? But yeah, like hardware efficiency.
We've seen that in a few places. I mean, we obviously seen with the new UCS-X series, they're talking about water cooling for that. Water cooling is no surprise to the sort of, home user market and things like that. But even in just general sort of PC computing, we've seen low power cores, some of the laptops and things today. The processors are becoming more and more low power, purely because of the sort of heat output and things. So yeah, I think that sort of dense core count in terms of whether it be storage, CPU, so on and so forth, it generates a lot more heat. But you get a few trade-offs around consolidating rack space, the power input and things like that, and it has a knock-on effect to sort of the green effect for everything.
I think the interesting thing is another element which does come up in Pure, but it's almost like the future that we're looking at is the fact that probably there's going to be expansion in the data center, not just with what we're looking at, but when we're looking, and it's taken us how long to get in, and I'm going to say it first, artificial intelligence, but what underpins AI is a hell of a lot of infrastructure, right? Because you've got all of this data that you're then obviously looking at to model and all the rest of it. So that needs a lot of compute power. It needs a lot of storage as well to accommodate, and GPU and all the rest of it. And I think a lot of businesses are coming to realize what it could deliver for them, right? The analytics side of it, or how they can leverage it to accelerate their business. So with that side increasing, and where you have a bit more of a limitation, because when you're talking about the standard applications, obviously that there's the ability to get more and more dense, to increase your number of VMs. And then with containers, again, you were able to make it more and more dense. But when it comes to the workloads around AI, they need that crunch, to run. So they need this power. So anything that can be reducing the consumption, knowing damn well that infrastructure actually is going to expand, has got to be beneficial. So even though, Adam, you said, actually the ramifications are quite broad, right? And so it is an exciting development.
Yeah, I think there was this like interesting number where I think it's 12 months pipeline for NVIDIA in terms of their GPUs. There is not enough data centers globally who can accommodate that amount of GPUs right now. So, there will need to be new data centers. And I think GPUs, like nothing else in the last many years, will have big implications in how you're going to be cooling down. Because to your point, Nige and Nick, in terms of the dense data centers, like GPUs are making the data centers even more dense. So like how are you gonna cool down the server, which is like loaded with like 10 GPUs, right? That's gonna be interesting as well. And where are you gonna build these data centers? I
That's
don't
the
think it's
problem.
gonna be
Yeah.
Europe. Like
Yeah.
Europe, UK is probably like I think the challenge in the Europe and the UK is usually data centers you have in the populated areas. Like in the US, you just like whack them somewhere in the middle of nowhere. And
Although,
yeah.
I can't remember how long ago I was reading how, I can't remember which of the hyperscalers it was, has been building self-contained pods, literally, which is a mini data center pod, and then just dropping it off the north coast of Scotland.
It was
So,
it
That was
exactly.
Microsoft, wasn't it?
Yeah,
It was
Microsoft, I thought it
think,
was.
yeah.
Using
Right.
the ocean to cool the data center.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
They brought that one back up. They put it down and ran it with consumer workload on, and they brought it back up, and now they put another one in, I think, and now they're doing like the second phase. It's pretty cool. Yeah. But
Gives
it
fishing
does,
a whole new term.
yeah, jackpot. Here's a fan of those GPUs. Yeah. Just haul this in. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, also what is interesting in terms of the data center and cooling and electricity is how different problems you have regional wise. So like in the UK and Europe is the electricity, right? It's the price for the electricity. It's the power draw you can have as a data center. Like, because usually these data centers in Europe are built in a highly dense, populated areas. I remember Frankfurt a few years ago, they said that for the next 5 years, they're not going to allow to build any new data center in Frankfurt. I think Amsterdam was pretty much the same. In the US, sometimes the problem is the opposite, right? You can build a data center almost anywhere. The power is cheap, it's everywhere. But when you look now, most of the data centers, I think are being built in Arizona. So like, in the middle of a desert. But how are you going to cool them? Like there is no water around. So how are you going to be cooling down data centers like that in these regions? So it's going to be interesting to see how this will sort of evolve.
Yeah, they're also kind of inherently built normally next to communication hubs, right? Like points where subsea fibers meet, etc., where they have like maximum bandwidth capability. But if you just like drop it in the middle of a desert in Arizona, you've got a fundamental connectivity problem as well. But yeah, you're totally right about the power density issue. Like you can tell I was reading some stuff about Ireland data centers recently, but they're essentially putting a hold or threatening to put a hold on all new data centers because literally just the grid infrastructure can't keep up. So coming back to kind of the increased demand for AI and exponential growth in storage and everything we're seeing in data centers, like it has to get more efficient, not just for the good of the planet, but literally we won't be able to continue at the rate we're doing in terms of like consumption if we don't find ways to be more efficient, because the grid just won't be able to be developed to keep up.
Yeah.
Matthias, what was your key takeaway from the event?
Well, so for me, again, like not so exciting new announcement, I think, but I really did like to hear about the CBS and how it has been. Apologies, I'm going to start again. Just Rob saying hi and jumping into the room. So yeah, my probably most exciting part of Pure Storage announcements was the CBS. It's great to see that Cloud Block Store almost seeing sort of a reset as a product. CBS has been announced probably 2018, 2019, something like that. I think it's the perfect example of for the product you need to have a right timing as well. At that time, it was a pretty good product, but timing wise, we were definitely somewhere else when it comes to the cloud migration and overall multi-cloud architecture. Let's say 4 years ago, the use cases haven't been there in my opinion at that time. I remember one of the few use cases which Pure Storage had about CBS was migration. So how we can sort of easily migrate from A to B, from on-prem to cloud, or the other way around. I think now, a few years back, we're seeing different use cases as the adoption is growing. Clients are putting more data into the cloud. We're seeing new use cases, new business cases where like CBS can address the challenges about the cost of storing the data in the public cloud, how you're managing it, how you operate that cloud operating model which Pure Storage is adopting as well. Sort of like a little bit taking that architecture from HashiCorp. So I think the HashiCorp sort of built that term cloud operating model, and now the other vendors are starting to adopting it, which is great, and I think is the right way to go. I think that where CBS sits really well as well, because it sort of like allows to build this cloud storage operating model across on-prem and cloud, and sort of like embrace this multi-cloud architecture. So I'm very positive on a CBS. Obviously, the most recent one around EVM there and in Azure is very exciting. I know Azure CBS architecture-wise seems better than AWS, because just Azure allows that to be a little bit more efficient in terms of the resources which CBS needs to be deployed. So cost-wise, it looks a little bit better than running CBS on the AWS. I guess like the adoption, especially in Europe, around the Azure is just higher than AWS. So I'm looking forward to see more use cases and more clients using CBS.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I've seen quite a few people talk about it recently, and I mean, obviously having CBS now on Azure, obviously with the VMware backing on top of it, it makes it far more accessible to a lot more clients that perhaps haven't had a look at AWS and things like that before. And also with the sort of massive cost reductions that they were talking about, being 50% cheaper than native storage within Azure, makes it very attractive to a lot of clients for that secondary repository for data, or to, bulk out different regions and things where they might not have physical kit.
I think it's in line, isn't it? What we're seeing with a lot of clients, they're actually starting to become more mature with public cloud, rather than it being the be all or end all. I think that they're realizing that, yes, it's a great solution. It gives that agility, right? If you need a content delivery all over the planet, CDN, fantastic agility for developers. It's brilliant. But when it comes to just like that lift and shift paradigm, where you have a workload that doesn't need to be agile, doesn't need to scale, it's just going to sit there, it almost becomes like a cost anchor, really. So anything that can be done to assist with that, and even it's been found, yes, you can try and do around the instances you're choosing and all the rest of it, but ultimately storage in public cloud can be, because you're doing it as forgotten the term for it. No, gone. Anyway, but when you put CBS in there, then it's doing the deduplication. It's doing the thick provisioning. That's what I was thinking of. When it's doing it, thin provision, dedupe compression, then obviously you can make with those workloads quite a substantial cost saving, and that does fall in line with the maturity around the whole operating model with public cloud, with on-prem, because most majority of clients we know, they are hybrid cloud or even multi-cloud, where they're beyond one public cloud as well. So it just makes for one solution that's relevant wherever they're hosting in that hosting environment. So it's another instance of decisions that Pure made a while back on their technologies and what they're able to do, and then something they put into cloud CBS, and everyone's thinking why, but now it's actually starting to come into its own.
Yeah, I completely agree too. Yeah, I think to Mattis's point, like having a consistent cloud operating model, a way that you manage your infrastructure across multi-cloud makes a lot of sense. Obviously, you kind of get that benefit when you're bringing VMware into Azure as well. But like historically, to your point, you've always lacked that ability to oversubscribe in Azure. It's always like, one-to-one, you create a virtual machine, you get that dedicated CPU, which is great if you need that. But, we kind of did that on-prem, and then we went to an oversubscription model to increase efficiency, and then lost that when you went to cloud. So being able to get that back, both from, a VMware perspective, but now also, from a CBS, dedupe, compression perspective, which, obviously Pure's particularly good at. Yeah, huge benefit.
And it's nice that it makes it all integrated into the same platforms that we're used to dealing with. So if you didn't want to particularly deal with an Azure portal, it's brilliant on sort of VMware backing and dealt through Pure One. So, it's a familiar platform, and it works right in with the rest of the tools.
Yeah, I think when I was reading some data sheets, it's essentially the purity, the same software they using for FlashArray and FlashBlades. It's being used for the CBS, which is great. So consistent APIs, and the other piece which was part of the announcement and got like way more traction is Las Vegas than when I was at the PureAccelerate than here in London, which was a little bit surprising. There was Fusion. Fusion was mentioned multiple times in Las Vegas at PureAccelerate. There was a dedicated stand for the Fusion team, for the Fusion product team. In London, it wasn't that noisy about the Fusion, and I think it. Like in Vegas, I changed a little bit my mind about the Fusion. I was always a little bit skeptical about Fusion, and it was sort of felt like a black box. But I think it makes complete sense now when Pure Storage has the portfolio ranging from the flash arrays and FlashBlades to CBS to Portworx to sort of allow that cloud operating model with a single tool. So it sort of makes that decision about where to deploy what workload and where. For you essentially just put in I need to deploy this, and then the Fusion will decide for you. So that's very powerful as well. And I suspect Fusion will take a probably year or two to take off to get some adoption. But I think it's a good product as well. So I'm quite curious on the Fusion product as well.
Yeah, it comes back to automation. That you don't want to be doing a lot of things when you've got a large fleet. You don't want to be doing a lot of things manually. It's just repetitive. You're not getting the most out of your team. You're not getting the most out of the technology. So I think it is an interesting subject, automation, because infrastructure as code has become the buzz, around automation, whereas we've been automating for so long with orchestrators, right? So that technology has existed. It's very good if you've got it set up. There's a lot that can be done with it. You don't necessarily need to suddenly jump over and do infrastructure as code, but it's become almost like, hey, we should do infrastructure as code. We should do infrastructure as code. Again, born out of public cloud, and it works very well in public cloud because you're talking about the top layer. You're not talking about the underlying infrastructure now that you're trying to automate, and it becomes challenging then to adopt Terraform in a private cloud or on-prem, because you may have such a disparate number of technologies that you're dealing with. So if the vendor such as Pure has then provided a way that you can automate your fleet simply without having to then code it all yourself with infrastructure as code or with an orchestrator with Fusion, then fantastic. Use that, and that that's obviously going to get developed and fully support, and as Pure do, can innovate all the time with it, then yes, use that tool definitely. So like you, Matthias, I think again it's going to start gaining traction because it's still relatively new, but certainly is going to help with that whole efficiency piece again.
It seems to be the way that they're going down. I remember from the event, the founder of Pure, Kaz, I think it was saying specifically about people don't want to have to figure out what sort of RAID set I need, what block sizes I need, and so on and so forth. And Pure's become that very simple tool of I need storage and provisions it in a very simple and user-friendly way. And I think Fusion is just the next step, sort of the evolution of that, making it even more accessible to most people, and making that automation piece a lot easier as well. It's definitely playing into their sort of vision for the future.
Cos was great because when he was explaining that stuff about the switch, you have when you enter the room and you just want to turn on the light, and you have the one switch. That's exactly how he wants you to manage your storage, not having different switches in the room, but just one switch, which was a nice comparison. I think I quite like that example.
It's hard though, and it's hard. The OCD in me doesn't want to relinquish, the visibility of but really, what's it doing? What's it doing under the tin? What RAID is there? Is it definitely okay? How many disks? It's hard. But I will admit, we've been, I think our fleet's almost 5 years old now, and initially when you first set it up, having the team worked with every other storage vendor under the sun. We're like, don't we need to create like pools and set raid levels? And like, well, what's it doing? But then you kind of just, you learn to let go and trust, and yeah, it works. It does exactly what it's meant to do. We've had, direct flash modules fail. They just come and get replaced. It's never been an issue. It just does exactly what it's supposed to do. And you just don't have to worry about it. It just works, which I guess is the point.
Brilliant. Nigel, was there any highlight out of the event for yourself?
Yeah, I think the announcement that actually tickled me the most was when Brian Cox was announced as being an astrologer. That did make me laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah, an astronomer I can understand, but we know he's obviously a particle physicist, really. But astrologer, that's kind of like, okay, right, Brian, yeah, what's the next 10 years going to be, right?
Read the stars, Brian.
Yeah. No, but I think the last aspect, with and there were two actual new announcements, obviously there, and they would do with Pure as a service. But I thought it was interesting that obviously Pure are backing what they're saying with this concept of we can reduce your energy bills by obviously with what you mentioned to begin with. And they're actually now backing that up with a figure, they're saying, okay, we'll calculate how much energy our array is going to cost you in the data center, and we're going to give you that as a credit up front, because we know it's going to be in effect so minimal, then fine, we can fund it. And then also there was this announcement around DR as a service, which is very intriguing because it was an announcement, but no in depth. So we've got to delve into that one another point and find out. But these are all to do with, the offerings that Pure have with Pure as a service, where you can get it subscription based for your on-prem infrastructure, but it also works with Cloud Block Store as well. So if you're doing that migration from on-prem into public cloud, or even, I saw an interesting stat from the Cloud Security Alliance recently, where they surveyed out 1,000 users of IT, and 59% of companies that responded, so they're actually bringing workloads back on-prem, and that comes back to that cloud efficiencies and maturity and all the rest of it. But obviously, then you're able to move that storage as a service in effect between the two and have that subscription across them both. But that's where they're also being innovative about their service offerings, right? If you get breached, and you need to do something about it, if everything's encrypted, then as part of that subscription, they'll ship a brand new array. So you've got this fresh array to start with, and you're not going to have to unpick what's on an existing array that's been fully encrypted and so on, So although Pure have been very innovative around their technology, definitely, but that innovation they're providing around their service, I think, is actually really interesting and is so relevant.
Yeah, I think they sort of like starting to see that these services is I think like the whole market with Flash is just getting a little bit more crowded than it used to be, and I think probably these services is the way they can differentiate. And I think the reason why they can introduce such innovative services is that how much far ahead they are their competitors. Like they've been like we've been with Pure Storage 6 or 7 years, and at that time they've been already doing Flash for like 6 or 7 years. So, these guys know really well what to do and what they're doing. And I think these services is definitely interesting. That upfront cost, the credits for the electricity is really interesting. That's an interesting angle. The DR as a service was AWS only, right? If I remember right. I don't think it was Azure yet.
No, yeah, I think you're right. It was just DR through into, so it must be using CBS or something. I don't know, but this is the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. We need to, as you said, like, we need to find a little bit more on that one. And yeah, to like, the interesting announcement, I remember like what was interesting was when, I think it was Kos who put that slide where he was explaining those like particular layers, which are basically what means Pure Storage and how consistent these layers are across all their portfolio. The Purity, which was for the single operation environment, the single management with the Pure One that's going across the whole portfolio, the cloud operating model, which is the Fusion, the sustainability, which goes across the whole portfolio. And as I said, I think, and it was also interesting. I think somebody said it. I don't know if it was cost, but somebody said that sustainability doesn't mean just the raw parts, but it is the TCO. That's how they want to differentiate it from the other vendors. Is that total cost of ownership, not just seeing it in the consumption, but seeing it also like how efficient it is to using their products, how efficiently they can integrate their products into with the infrastructure as a code or into the other hardware. That was quite interesting message as well, where like basically they're like admitted like, look, sustainability is not just the answer. Like there's like so much more. It is like how you can sort of like challenge the other competitors is the TCO bit, to explain to your clients that the TCO is the key. So that was interesting for me as well.
Yeah, there was a few things around sustainability and the consolidation and that. And I think you also made a comment around the very first Pure storage array, or the first Pure storage customer that had quite a few racks worth of equipment is still running today. It just shows how they update their kit along the way, and it's done in a very sustainable manner with zero downtime throughout that process. And however many years, 16 years later or whatever, it's still running. And it's still providing the same service in, I think it was a tenth of the space, down to 2 racks or something now. So it just shows you how far the consolidation has moved along in terms of the density of the storage, and then also that sustainability piece in keeping that stuff going. Their commitment to the hardware and software is amazing.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you think about it, like the biggest service vendors can do in terms of the sustainability is obviously innovate, so the like efficiency is improving and the consumption is almost like kilowatt per IOPS. Like that's how you really sort of like said like that efficiency, you can sort of like measure it. But I think the biggest service they could do is like, what if the hardware is going to last not for 3 years but for 5 or 6 years? I think if you are like, you as a vendor sort of like pushing your clients to refresh your service every 3 years, that's like like they would come to you and tell you like every 3 years like you need to buy a new car, like we're not supporting anything from your car in 3 years, you need to have a new one. So I think that Pure Storage is doing it pretty good. I understand, we're like, we're living in a world where capitalism, is like, that's how it works. You just need to sell new products. But I think, in my opinion, from a sustainability perspective, this is probably the greatest service vendors could do, sort of like expand the longevity of the products they're providing.
Yeah, which obviously, as you said, Pure is capable of doing, and they've done it and are doing it. And as Nick said, they've been doing it since inception. And the interesting piece, because in the back of my mind, more recently, I've been thinking, but you've been doing that physically, upgrading the controllers, non-disruptively. But then what's happening with the old ones, right? And obviously they did cover that off at the event, where I can't remember, but it's such a low amount of what their waste that comes from what they take back, and they are repurposing it, etc. So that was also good to find out, because it was like, it's all well and good that you're keeping people up to date with what's happening with the old ones, but they're being really efficient about that as well, which is good to find out.
I suppose the other thing that came out was a bit of a revamp of Evergreen, right? Which I think kind of got not skipped over, but it was didn't really make a really big deal out of it. But it is quite a big change. They've historically always had sort of silver and gold. And gold, they'd replace your array controllers every 3 years, which is brilliant and very efficient, etc. Talked about their oldest running a single array that's, been the same array just with controllers and bits swapped out for, over 10 years. But obviously changing Evergreen is quite a big deal. And they seem to be shifting to now these 3 tiers of Evergreen, and changing the focus rather than it being on, okay, we just give you support. Now we also give you support and hardware refresh. It felt like they were changing it to be essentially the different tiers, allowing you as an operator to provide a greater SLA for your service. So in the top tier, they were including like DR as a service and ransomware protection and various other capabilities that would allow you as an operator to restore service more quickly by using public cloud or whatever, and then all the way down to pretty much silver as it was before. So it kind of feels like a bit of a realignment there and a change in a bit of a recognition, I suppose, that they've moved on from just being storage to now actually storage and services. And Evergreen feels like it's now aligning those services to the product.
So what about you then, Nick?
Yeah.
Did you have a takeaway then from,
Oh, there was a lot. Matthias stole my thunder around the VMware components. But yeah, apart from Mr. Brian Cox, it was an amazing event. There was a lot that came out of it. I think one of the key things I remember, sort of the improvements that they've made. They were talking about how the software gets upgraded over time and how new features get unlocked on existing pieces of hardware. Now, me personally, if I want a new feature on my phone or a laptop or something like that, I've generally got to go buy a new model. But they were talking about how through feature releases, they release new technologies. And they had this slide that came up that was almost completely full. There was no white space on it with the amount of words they had on it.
Yeah.
And there was all the different software features that had been put in through patches just along the way. Like, automatic safe mode and things like that had just become part of the offering, that was just a feature upgrade on an existing bit of kit. So a kit that didn't have it years ago now has it. And I find that just absolutely amazing. It does get glossed over pretty easily, but that ability that it constantly is receiving feature updates, it's constantly receiving new features, and that they continue to work on it, that for me personally makes it worth its weight in gold. That you don't need to actually buy new kit to get new features or upgrade to get new features. It's there in a software patch.
Yeah, and I think the latest one really is evidence of that, right? Where Pure traditionally were very great initially around block, but not so much file. However, again, and they haven't just shoehorn file in, they've built it as its own stack, so it's treated as first class citizen just alongside blockers, and it's not file overlaid on what they had. They've done that, but then that becomes a feature that those who have already got the array can now suddenly use it for file just like that. And you think about it, that's actually really is quite something.
Yeah. That must be amazing to, wake up one morning and say, oh, I can only run object storage and do a quick feature update, and hey, I can support file now. It's just that kind of upgrade never used to be available via software, or never used to be delivered via software. And, for that continuing sort of software upgrades within the feature set I find it unbelievable, because most clients, most vendors that I know of, and I won't say, would generally say that's a paid for service. It's additional DLC and things like that, that you need to go and pay for. And for that to be coming, free of charge on their upgrades as they go along, I find that invaluable. Really, to me, sounds like they're putting the client first, and that's all we need.
Agreed.
Nick, is it the coincidence you're wearing the orange polo shirt?
Might be.
I should have put my orange tie on, shouldn't I? As well. Not with a check shirt.
Orange on me now.
I was going to put my Pure socks on, but then I don't think anyone wants to see my feet, right? So.
But all in all, it was a very good event. I'm looking forward to attending again next year. Anyone else with some closing thoughts before we finish?
Yeah, I think it's been a great event. It's been great to see Pure Storage clients, other partners at the event. I think the venue was great. And I said to Pure Storage, I think it was a bit better than the last year. Like last year was really good, but this year was even better. So I'm looking forward to next year. Even for someone like I was attending a few months ago, the PureAccelerate in Vegas, so that's kind of like the main conference. It was still very much comparable. It was a really, really well done conference. So thumbs up.
Brilliant. So thank you everyone for tuning in to our NatChat, talking about the PureAccelerate updates. And I want to say thank you from everyone here, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks.
Thank you for having us, Nick.
Thanks.